The movie's good. Captain Marvel is actually a good movie, as I hoped. It has a great cast of characters to offset a mediocre storyline in a setting that's very familiar now to anyone who watches these Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. This origin story is set in the 90s and has a great soundtrack for those who grew up in the time period. The atmosphere and all the details in the film really give it a character all its own. And there's no shortage of interesting action to keep the movie's pacing from suffering. Carol Danvers is no social justice warrior, but she is a warrior in this film. But thankfully, there is no Carl Danvers here. Brie Larson doesn't have the widest range of emotion in this film, but her character does have a flair for the sarcastic, and she can be lighthearted sometimes. That said, her story arc avoids some of the pitfalls of that of Mary Sue, though to be fair, she's pretty powerful in this film. And I can't really say more than that without going into spoiler territory, but it does seem like Marvel Studios, or just Kevin Feige himself, made sure that this movie wasn't going to go out and insult the fans, even if there was some subtle and some not so subtle political messaging throughout. This movie, as it turns out, is not actually dominated by progressive politics. It does have some male chauvinistic tropes thrown in there, with no shortage of strong, spunky, and confident female characters, but the script wasn't written to insult the audience. This is not a feminist movie per se, but it is a movie with a strong female character who maybe isn't as humanizing as she should be, but she's no featureless drone. There are plenty of times where Carol is not very powerful in this film, and sometimes when she's actually vulnerable, but she still fights back. But she's no man-hater, and I think some of the hype and hilarity about this film before its release has been a little bit overblown. Brie Larson did what she could with the role for the script that she was given, but I don't think she was given a set of circumstances to really show off like vulnerability, for example. There's no come from nothing character arc where it builds up to where she's the hero we all dreamed of. There's also no fear of her potentially losing anything in this film. So that's a failure on the writers, maybe even the producer to some extent, but not the actor in my opinion. I don't know if she's earned herself as a flagship superhero role here, as there are quite a few other characters in this MCU that I believe are more endearing, but I think there are lessons to learn from the mistakes that were made in this film, and I think that if she can have really good chemistry with other Avengers and other characters in other films, she does have the potential to grow into a really good character, but I don't think she's there yet. I think she's interesting, but not motivating and captivating, so we're going to see how that goes. One thing I want to point out is the use of special effects was amazing. Some of the combat fighting in space was top notch, and as you might expect from Industrial Lighting and Magic, the studio known for their technical wizardry, that is something that they're really good at. And some of the effects you won't notice at all are good because you don't notice them, and that's the process to make young a number of characters in this film. It's basically flawless at this point, and I didn't have any sort of uncanny valley issues watching this film. However, one weak aspect of this film was the music. This was probably where they cut corners to some extent, or maybe they just didn't focus as much here, or they just didn't have the repertoire that they needed to produce a really good soundtrack here. Like, not music, but like the sort of audio that we would come to expect in these films nowadays. It is visually stunning in places, but outside of the music that takes place in this film, the audio isn't as much to speak of. Some of the song music is kind of blah. It all averages out to be a good production. It's no Captain America Civil War, but it's also no Thor Dark World either. It's a good lead into the next movie, Avengers Endgame. And I do think this movie does a good job of keeping some mysteries mysterious throughout the film. That said, it does lack charismatic villains, as is common in these Marvel films, or even relatable ones, in my opinion. But overall, there are no shortage of good characters throughout for you to enjoy, and I like seeing some of them in particular. However, there was one in particular that I didn't like the change to that character's origin and how it relates to this film, so I'm disappointed there, and that's something I'll go into in my spoiler review. But in particular, I enjoyed this film. I thought it was good. I had my two boys with me, and they both enjoyed it. And they had some nitpicks here, pretty much along the lines of what I mentioned here. But overall, Captain Marvel is a good movie. If you really want to see all the films in the MCU, there's no reason to skip on this one. The political agendas of people on the far left and the far right, or just the far out, I think they're both going to be let down in this film because it's just not that political a film, and it doesn't insult anyone per se. It does have a couple of those tropes that I mentioned, but all in all, I think it was a good enough film, certainly a middling to average quality level for the films you'd come to expect from the 20 or so in this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And one thing I want to point out is I'm going to be doing more movie reviews throughout the rest of the year, usually one non-spoiler review followed up by spoiler review after. And I'm going to do all the major blockbuster science fiction, fantasy, and comic book related films throughout the next year. So you're welcome to subscribe to this channel. You'll be seeing other content on this channel as well, but I do want to mention more movie reviews are coming. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.